Defacto Gazette is a weekly publication of independent political and economic news analysis by the economist Jaril Sechen. Our gazette is published in Mongolian, English, Japanese, and Russian. Please order your subscription online at www.jargildefacto.com or from the post office called Mongol Shudan near you. Also, you can order by phone at 7007 8916.
One is the fund of future.
Good evening. Welcome to Defacto Review, our weekly in-depth analysis on current news and affairs with our commentator, Nasımbat Narımbat.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, and I'm your host, Batsir Namshur. You can join in our conversation on MNB World Facebook page and on Twitter with hashtag #Jargal_Defacto. Our topics for today. 79.5% of Parliament members present at the session voted to approve the bill to cancel pension-backed loan on Friday, January the 10th of 2020. The President suspended the judicial powers of 17 judges in connection with a case related to the Selkut silver ore deposit in June. However, he hasn't appointed any replacements as of today, thereby making the operation of the court uncertain, especially the civil chamber of the Supreme Court of Mongolia. The government stated that at its cabinet meeting on Wednesday, the government decided to set up a hedge fund to keep AI-90 petrol price stable as a part of policy to prevent further price increases. Since the 1st of January 2020, there has been a widespread reaction and discussion on a plan that the government would pay off all pension-backed loans. The Mongolian National Security Council, the members of which are the President, the Speaker of Parliament and the Prime Minister, recommended implementing a debt forgiveness plan for retired people. Finally, 79% of Parliament members voted to approve the bill to pay off the loans. So the first question is, what will be the implication for the economy?
Well, thank you for the question. Well, let me spare a few vital moments of that so-called debt forgiveness plan. Mm-hmm. First of all, debts up to 6 million will be pardoned. Then 776 billion tugris in total will be spent on this particular program. Mm-hmm. And debt-free pensioners are to be given a voucher worth 1 million tugriks. Mm-hmm. So those are vital moments of the plan. So how would this affect the whole economy? Well, first of all, I'm afraid the tugrik will depreciate. Mm-hmm. Meaning, when the government dump in a matter of month or two 776 billion tugriks, there is an indefinite risk of tugrik depreciation against foreign currencies. Mm-hmm. Well, look, there have been some heated debates over the course of the last 2 weeks or so. Mm-hmm. And right after the announcement, tugrik already weakened against the US dollars by 10 tugriks, and it's plummeting. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I doubt whether government could keep up the inflation in a single digit. Speaker said, we expect inflation would be increased by 1% only. I don't know from where he did get those numbers, but I do believe those are completely false expectations. Mm-hmm. So inflation is already in UBCT around 5.8% already. And experts say that the effects of the plan will be known within the 6 months. So I'm afraid that the negative impacts of that plan will backfire exactly during the election of 2020. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mongolia secured an economic stabilization package from the International Monetary Fund in 2017 in a bid to head off economic crisis. The decision to cancel these pension-backed loans violates the 2017 IMF bailout deal, according to a statement from an IMF state member when Parliament approved the bill. What risk will this bring to Mongolia?
It's a good question, actually. Well, it was obvious from the very beginning because during his New Year's speech, President of Mongolia already mentioned that program has to be A, passed through the Parliament of Mongolia, and B, passed through the IMF approval. And let me quote the IMF rep here in Mongolia, Mr. Geoff Gottlieb. He said, the government's proposal to cancel pension-backed loans is not consistent with the authorities' goal under the IMF-supported program agreed in 2017. It already increases the high public debt by 2% of the GDP to help narrow one part of the population regardless of their financial needs. So that's in a direct statement from IMF. It will create a tension, a tough negotiation with the IMF, between the government of Mongolia and IMF, because according to our plan, the government agreed to cut spendings, raise taxes to balance its books. Secondly, it also pledged to implement fiscal reforms in order to maintain budget discipline and improve the way it regulates the banking and finance sector. I'm afraid, the further financial help and support will be cut or scrutinized. It also, the government is doing exactly the opposite what it has to do. The risks are multi-sided, unfortunately. Foreign investors would think twice before investing in Mongolia now. If government cannot keep up with its promises, who would invest? That's the main problem. Those are real tangible risks that we do expect that would backfire on us.
In Mongolia, what are the economists' reaction to this decision? What do you think?
Well, we need to understand the experts and economists, they're all opposing such decision. Because obviously, government need to understand that, one-time pardon will not elevate Mongolians out of poverty, for sure. What we need is a fundamental structural change to lift out of Mongolians out of poverty and misery. This is what the experts are agreeing upon. In my opinion, all experts, NGOs, public organizations, we all now need to unite and try to influence the decision makers about the negative effects of the plan. This is what we have to do now as a public.
How should we move forward to make sure these kinds of decisions are not repeated?
We all collectively need to oppose the government's wrongdoing altogether, that including experts, this is including NGOs, public organizations. And hopefully still, because the IMF already have stated that it's in a direct violation with the terms set upon in plan in 2017, then hopefully IMF would be able also to influence the government to review and revisit the decision.
Okay. Our next topic is about the appointment of judges. On December the 30th, the Mongolian president appointed some judges. This appointment only involved some local level courts as judges. As you know, previously, the president suspended the judicial powers of 17 judges in connection with a case related to the Selkut silver ore deposit in June. However, he hasn't appointed any replacements as of today. So, first, could you explain what the president's powers are regarding the judiciary?
Regarding the judiciary system, president's power is quite enormous. So we can characterize in 3 terms. First of all, President of Mongolia is in charge of appointing all judges. Secondly, he can recommend state prosecutor and the deputy, and if state chorale doesn't approve, then he can recommend another candidate, alternative candidate. And then the third power is to appoint and dismiss chairman of General Council of Court and its members. This is what it's in line with what president can do regarding the judicial system.
Well, what appointments did he make on December the 30th?
On December the 30th, he has appointed 12 judges, one judge as a high court judge, 6 judges in the first instance court of UBCT and provinces, and 5 judges in the first instance, and administrative courts are rotated.
17 judges were relieved of their duties due to the Selkirk ore deposit case. Why are there no new appointments made for these vacancies? What international precedent is there regarding this case of inaction of the president?
Oh, this is quite a technical question, to be honest. I'm not a professional lawyer myself, so my opinions might be somewhat incorrect. My apologies. But if we look back at the history, what happened in June 2019, President has temporarily suspended 17 judges who are deemed to be connected to the Selkirk silver mine. Lawyers and experts, they say, because the appointment took longer than it's expected, high court operations were somewhat limited. But that's not quite simple as that. Because first and foremost, the presidential decree on June 2019 referred as the temporary suspension of duties, meaning they are not fired, they are not dismissed. They're just temporarily suspended. Okay? So, and currently the 17 judges, what they do, they go undergoing the investigation. And the merit of not guilty until proven still applies here in our case. And after investigation, the ones who are deemed to unrelated to the Selkirk silver deposit, they may return to their duties. And the ones who are connected, of course, their case will be transferred to the court. And you know that the court itself, it's pretty lengthy and time-consuming process. First you go to a first instance, to the second and third, and the high court. So it's going to be, it will require quite extended time and efforts for sure. And if we look into the international practice, unfortunately, and sorry for my language, we need to understand that appointment of high court judges is a lengthy process, A, and B, it's always highly politicized. It's same everywhere in the world, in Mongolia, in the United States, in any part of the world. This process itself is very highly politicized. So if we are referring to an international case, what could go wrong or what could go right in our particular case, there are plenty of practices, as I said, but I would like to refer this one to a case that happened here in Mongolia in 2013 when President Elbegdorj dismissed 13 judges in 2013. And because he's a lawyer, he understood that, that reappointing them or reappointing new judges is a lengthy process. What he did, he dismissed all judges. He made a structural change. And he sacked all the judges, and he introduced a new structure and naming. Instead of calling a Bengal district court, he renamed it, and from that moment, we all started calling a first and second degree district courts, so on and so forth. And then he reappointed all judges. Of course, excluding those unfortunate 13 ones. Right? This is what happened. I do believe that it is in the president's Batpolga's interest to keep the judiciary system as efficient, as transparent as possible. That's my gut, and I don't think so that he will try to do the same. But for sure, we need to understand this is a very lengthy process. It will take some time to appoint those 17 judges.
Okay, let's move on to our last topic. the government stated that at its cabinet meeting on Wednesday, the government decided to set up a hedge fund to keep AI-92 petrol prices stable as a part of policy to prevent further price increases. The government stated oil prices have been rising due to the Iran-American conflict, but now are falling again. So, is the government's decision related to that, or it's an election surprise for general parliamentary election?
I think maintaining a competitive oil price, petroleum price here in Mongolia was a worrisome for most of the governments. They tried one way or another to control and maintain a healthy and competitive pricing. I don't think so whether this particular introduction of the hedge fund related to the US-Iranian war. I don't think so. Maybe it's somehow related to the election 2020. But the intention that the government is trying to bring a new approach into maintaining the petroleum price is good. The intention is excellent. So this is indefinitely a welcome news. Right? If we look at in the past, what the government tried to do, they tried to subsidize the petroleum company in order to keep the petroleum prices low, and also secondly, what they have tried, when the MNT depreciated, then the excise taxes are kept at lowest, and when MNT appreciate, they trying to increase the excise taxes. What happened now? And if we look at the petroleum companies, how they try to deal with that uncertainty and keeping the prices low, they try to minimize the risk buying in bulk, and then hence buying in bulk requires a lot of financial resources upfront and gigantic investment into the logistic and infrastructure. So it was quite burdensome. And I think we need to mention here that all combined reserves of all Mongolian petroleum companies could dry run only in 1 month. Only in 1 month. So hedging is the solution for sure.
For the first time, Mongolia is going to introduce a mechanism to stabilize imported fuel prices by tying them to the world market. That's called hedging. Could you explain hedging and how does it work?
Sure.
Could you elaborate on this?
Well, I'm trying to speak in a very simple and plain English, right? So what the hedging means. First of all, we need to understand that price of the petroleum depend on the price of the oil. And there are two institutions in the world that set so-called spot prices for the crude oil. So one is based upon in EU, so-called EU Brent spot price, and the other one is called the WTI, West Texas Intermediate spot prices. So those institutions, they setting the crude oil price. According to my knowledge, the big trading companies, they started effectively engaging with the hedge funds in order to protect its turnover from unexpected events, such as the US-Iranian war, right? Could be taken as an example. So how does the hedging works? So you and I, if you are a buyer, I'm a seller, you and I, we agree on a particular price for the X amount of time that I commit, whether the price of the crude oil goes down and up, I commit a certain price only. This is how it works. So you can buy from me and a constant price that we set upon the X time, I know. We set at $10 per ton for the next 12 months. And this is what I commit to you. This is how hedging works. But I also have to tell here and mention here, the hedging is a new instrument. It's a relatively new instrument, especially in the last 5 to 10 years. So the hedge funds, there are plenty of hedge funds worldwide for petroleum, for oil, for commodities, you name it. So what they do, the competitive advantage of the hedge funds come from information they try to gather. They know what is going to happen in 6 months, in 12 months. You and I, we don't, because we don't have resources, the professionals who can provide us with such confidential, objective information. So this is how they do the money: high risk, high return, as compared to the conventional investment funds. Right? This is how the hedging works. And in our particular case, since this is the very first time in Mongolia, government of Mongolia is trying to set up a hedge fund. I don't know whether they can recruit or employ the true professionals who do have adequate experience in hedging. I don't know yet, but if they don't, I reckon they go with a partnership with the big hedge funds, because big hedge funds, they have their own leverages, connections, right, strategies. And why we need a strong partner in a hedge fund? Because, for instance, 95% of the petroleum is being supplied currently by Rosneft. So that strong partner, hedge fund, should be able to perform tough negotiations with the Rosneft and the other companies on our behalf. Otherwise, it won't work. It's a very well interconnected industry, hedge fund.
As for the question of how to maintain fuel price stability, we must talk about the proposed oil refinery which will be built in Dorngal province. Could you inform us about what's happening and how much the refinery is progressing?
Okay, so we all know in 2015, the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, has visited Mongolia, and he offered a soft loan package from the India Exim Bank on the infrastructure projects. So the government of Mongolia decided to utilize those resources on building a first Mongolian oil refinery factory. We know that the proposal is ready. The proposal is ready. Around October and November time frame, the Prime Minister of Mongolia, he visited Dorngal province and did the grand opening. I checked the website of the Mongol refinery, and they said the construction will begin in March 2020 and expected to be in service by 2023. If you look at the factory itself, the factory, they have a production capacity to refine 1.5 million tons annually. So that's their current capacity. So technically, if we look into an oil refinery, of course it's a complicated technological process, but it's quite simple to an extent that it can be erected in 1 year or 2. But I couldn't find the information who will be supplier of the crude oil. That's another topic. And as I said, I couldn't find the public information. Maybe the people at the Mongol refinery, they already have a couple of options. I don't know yet. So the question of who, where, and how will supply the crude oil remains open as far as of today. Why it is important? Because some might say, Mongols, we do have our crude oil in Dorned province. But Mongolian oil is high in paraffin and other residuals, so it requires a lot of purification processes that influence the end price. So that's what we do know. So Mongolian oil is not particularly suitable for processing. Yeah, it has a paraffins and other residuals that can be used in cosmetics and other industries. Yes, it's fine. This is why China is importing our crude oil on a daily basis. Right? But Mongolian oil is not suitable for the production. So the question remains open. And what we have to do, we have to wait and see how the logistic problem will be solved.
Generally, how important is the oil refinery for Mongolia?
I think it is important, of course, because 95%, we're not producing anything. So we are highly dependent on Rosneft and other suppliers, especially from Russia and China and South Korea. recently now. So having an own oil refinery is important, but we also have to consider that the portion of the gasoline cars will decrease in the future. So electric cars will take over more and more and more. Well, some European countries, they say by 2025, the half of the cars within the city will be electric. So that would affect the overall consumption. But until you hit the critical mass, because there have been some opinions in other newspapers where that particular Mongolian oil refinery could not sustain a profitable operations. I haven't seen the numbers, so I cannot comment on that. Neither I can speculate. But I know the trend is that the number of electric cars are increasing, meaning that it will affect the overall consumption of the petroleum. So it will go down for sure. So maybe, it's still 50-50. It's still 50-50 to judge upon.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Narmbat, for your time and
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Okay. This has been a Defacto review. We'll see you next Sunday with more topics. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
One is